Thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We're a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Hi, I'm Stephen Willis, and this is an extra edition of the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, and we are joined today by Michael Bratton, the host of that SEC podcast that has just taken the internet by storm. How you doing, Michael?
Hey, doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I started following your podcast. Honestly, you started doing it about the time I started podcasting as well. So you had no idea who I was, but I was kind of watching what you were doing online. Talk about basically what it was like getting your podcast to the level it is now, because it's pretty consistently on the charts. I'm seeing it all over video. You're doing live streams now. Just talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, well, it's truly a independent show, and it's just me and my cousin Shane. And yeah, people always ask, "Is he really your cousin?" He really is. It's just us slapping it together. You know, a lot of times it's like we did media days this last year. We've done media days a couple times now, but this is the first time we did live shows from media days, and we didn't know if people could hear us. We didn't know if people could see us because a lot of these productions, a lot of these shows, I mean, they've got teams of people, and no, it's me wrangling people, getting them on set, doing the cameras, doing the audio, doing the editing, doing the posting. So we really are just a small time thing, and that could be a negative for sure, but there's always positives to things like that too. So I mean, we swear, not constantly, but we have the ability to do that. We drink on the show. There's no one that could tell us what we can and can't say, and no one sued us yet. So, yeah, we're just going to keep doing it.
So how did you get connected with Paul Finebaum? Because I see you on the Finebaum show pretty regularly.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I knew. Just his producers reached out one time and had me on, and yeah, Paul and I have become pretty friendly. I'm going to be on his show again Friday. I live in Nashville. Well, right now I live with cousin Shane, kind of in East Tennessee, out in the sticks. But I most of the year I live in Nashville. That's where the show's going to be on Friday, and going to be down on Broadway. So you can catch me on there this Friday again. But I don't know. He and I have just kind of struck up a friendship, and he's told me before that a lot of people are just don't say anything interesting, and they're kind of careful with their words. Again, I've got nothing to lose. I've got no one can fire me. I own every 100% of my business. I own it. So as long as you don't go too far on the ledge and say something crazy, which we never do. We have hot takes and things of that nature, but I don't know. He keeps having me back, and I keep giving him what he likes to hear. So he keeps having me on, and I haven't screwed it up. That's basically that would be the real lesson there. It's not how to do it, but just don't screw it up if you get that opportunity.
Yeah, I tell people all the time that is thinking about getting into podcasting, and they're like real careful what they want to do. They want to make everybody happy. They can't handle any bit of criticism. And I tell them there's no such thing as right and wrong in this business. It's basically whether they like it or whether they hate it, because if they're down the middle, that's not good.
If you're trying to get people to like you, what you're going to do is you're going to lose the people that actually do like you, and the people that you're trying to force into liking you. You're going to lose everybody essentially. So, yeah, I mean, that's the last thing. Just be authentic and be consistent. That's what I always tell people if they want to grow their program.
All right, let's get into the 2023 football season because it's almost here. This is going to air on Thursday night, so you're going up against Florida and Utah. So I'm sorry, Michael. So what do you look as the Ole Miss Rebels go into the 2023 season? What type of year outlook could they have?
Well, I think they're a serious dark horse. They're my dark horse out of the West. Now, how I define that is a team that virtually no one is picking to win the division that I think realistically can. And I think that is Ole Miss out of the West. Lane Kiffin, how do you not respect a guy like that for his play calling abilities? I think Jackson Dart, should he be named the starting quarterback? I was told last week he was, but yet here we are, days away from kickoff, and that's not official yet to my knowledge. But I think he's going to have a huge season, and a lot of that has to do with Judkins, of course, who's the best running back probably in the entire country. I don't think it's crazy to think that Judkins could have a 2,000-yard season. He's that caliber of running back. But the addition of Pete Golding, Alabama fans were happy to see him go, but Ole Miss was happy to get him. And I think that's fair or not. I mean, I think that was a win-win there, but I think it's really going to be a big win for Ole Miss and this defense. And he's, according to who you listen to, I don't know if you're a big fan of Dave Bartu, CFB Matrix, but he's got Pete Golding as one of the top 10 defensive coordinators in the country. And he uses a system that is not opinion-based. It's just raw data, what you have to work with in terms of players, what the opponent has, and where the game's played. It's a very, very simple metric. And Pete Golding currently rates as one of the top 10 defensive coordinators in the country. So massive upgrade for Ole Miss. That doesn't mean they're going to have a top 10 defense in the country. They don't have the players to do that. But if they're just not god-awful in some conference games, I mean, that's going to be a major step in the right direction. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not big into, like, the record's going to be this, the record's going to be that. But, 8, 9, possibly even 10 wins. And I know they play Georgia, but they catch Georgia the week before Tennessee. And I think that's critical. I think that's one of the biggest trap games of the entire SEC slate. I think Ole Miss potentially could beat Georgia. Of course, I'm not crazy enough to pick that here. But, yeah, they got a tough schedule. But it's one thing to look at the schedule now, today, before the season kicks off, and determine who's got a hard schedule, who's got an easy schedule. That never pans out. We can't really evaluate these schedules to the end of the year anyway, so I don't make my predictions based on the schedules. But I realize playing in Athens, that's the toughest draw you can get in the SEC right now.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And that's interesting to me as well. My brother-in-law, who does my SEC After Dark, my independent show, is a big Tennessee person. So we kind of, that weekend is just kind of circled within the family as well. Now, besides Ole Miss, we expect Ole Miss to be fun. And you were absolutely right about the Jackson Dart thing. Everything that everybody has been told has been Jackson Dart. And the only person that's saying that it's not Jackson Dart is the person that is going to name the quarterback. So I don't know. It's one of those type situations. So what teams do you think could surprise in the SEC this year?
The main one, and it seems like everybody's kind of caught on this, but it's Kentucky. I think Kentucky's going to be really good. And before people say, well, wait a second, is what they say every year. Well, that's not what I was saying. I went on national television, Paul Finebaum, and I picked Kentucky 5th in the East last year, and I said all the Will Levis hype was a joke. He's not a first-round pick, and I think I was verified on all that. So this is not an annual me hyping up Kentucky, but I legitimately think it is. They've got probably the best duo of coordinators in the entire SEC. Brad White is just overlooked everywhere, probably because he's a Kentucky defensive coordinator, but he's fantastic. Liam Cohen, he was only there 1 year, but the 1 year he was there, he actually did make Will Levis look like a competent quarterback. So I think they got the coaching, although I'm not a huge fan of Mark Stoops. He's about a C-grade coach. Again, according to Dave Bartu's analytics, and after 10 years, you are what your record, your grade says you are. There's no guesswork there. But I think Kentucky, they get Bama at home, they get Tennessee at home, they go to Georgia. Those are their 3 toughest games. Not saying they're going to win outright the rest of them, but I think between Tennessee at home and Alabama at home, I think they beat one of those teams. And it may be Alabama. I'm very down on Alabama compared to most right now. So Kentucky is a big, big sleeper in my opinion. I think they probably win 10 games this year.
Could be interesting. Now, this is the real question that the SEC fans are all interested in. Did Kentucky steal the checkerboard from Tennessee?
They did, yeah. I think I read somewhere where they've done away with that, though, because it was a blatant ripoff. But, Kentucky fans now can turn around and say, you mocked us endlessly for years for Kroger Field. Now you got Food City Basketball Arena, whatever it's called. And I don't know about you, but I prefer Kroger to Food City any day of the week.
Oh, definitely. I believe it or not, there is not a Kroger in the state of Florida, which is where I do my podcast from. There's not a Kroger in the state, but I can get Kroger delivery.
How's
Seriously.
that work? They
I, I
airlift it in?
I do not know, but I just order it on the app, and next thing you know, the next morning there's a Kroger truck in my front yard. And I was like, okay. So that's pretty interesting. Now, we're going to move on from the Kentucky and Tennessee stuff, and we're going to talk about the Real Housewives of College Stations. That is the Bobby Petrino and Jimbo Fisher relationship. Can that work?
Yeah, and I know it's easy to make the jokes. I made the jokes myself when they hired him, but I'm pretty connected to a lot of people there with Texas A&M, and I've not heard any issues whatsoever with Bobby Petrino and Jimbo Fisher. And I'm a guy that I've been banned from some Texas A&M outlets because of the things I've said about Jimbo. So I'm not biased towards Jimbo. In fact, I would have fired him already if I was running Texas A&M, because that's easy for me to say. I don't have the money to buy him out, but I think he's been awful, particularly last year. He's not lived up to the promises and the hope and the hype and all that when he got there, but they're stuck with him. And I thought probably the best move of the offseason was adding Bobby Petrino, because Jimbo Fisher's so god-awful at calling plays, developing quarterbacks, and engineering an offense. Well, that's exactly what Bobby Petrino excels at: quarterbacks, play calling, and the scheme. And, I think it's a perfect marriage. Get Jimbo's hands off of it. Just let Bobby do that. He doesn't have to deal with boosters. He doesn't have to deal with fans. He probably doesn't even talk to anybody else on the team other than the quarterback. So I think it's perfect for Bobby Petrino. I think it's perfect for Jimbo Fisher. And that's a big reason that this is a team we hype up every year. So I'm guilty there. But I really do think they have the roster. They got the coaching in College Station to have a big year. This is another team. I would be very, very disappointed in the Aggies if they don't win 9 games minimum. And I think even if they don't win 8, let's say they go 7-5, they got to fire Jimbo.
Interesting thought there. What's something in the SEC that I haven't asked you about that I should be thinking about?
Probably Tennessee. Now, I'm a little biased. I'm a Tennessee graduate. I don't hide that, but I think people look at it and they see Hendon Hooker's gone. They see some fantastic receivers like Jalen Hyatt and Cedric Tillman off to the NFL. Darnell Wright, the right tackle, is a top 10 pick. So they did lose some star power, but every guy I just mentioned, nobody heard of him until Josh Heupel was the coach. And just based on the buzz from Knoxville that I'm hearing, that I'm not a huge believer. I'm not one of these people that's just buying into the Joe Milton hype. I'm kind of reserved on that. But the rest of the team, I think they got something down there. And certainly didn't see them winning 11 games last year. I thought that maybe best case scenario, they'd win 9. So they won 11. They won the Orange Bowl, and they host Georgia. So, again, you're pretty damn crazy if you don't pick Georgia to win the East. A lot of people have Georgia as the runaway winner in the SEC. I actually have LSU winning the entire conference. But, of course, I got Georgia winning the East. But it would not surprise me if Tennessee's that team, because the defense that a lot of people, they watch the South Carolina game, they think the defense is terrible at Tennessee. That's not accurate. It's getting better every year. It's getting more talented every year, and this is going to be the best defense yet. Defense won Tennessee 4 games last year: Pitt, LSU, Kentucky, and Clemson. And 2 of those games were arguably 2 of the biggest wins they had, aside from maybe the Alabama game last year. So Tennessee is a team to watch. And I know that's probably not a bold statement, but I'm talking, once again, SEC contender, potential playoff contender on Rocky Top.
Okay. You say that, and I just have a question for you on that. Joe Milton has won the starting quarterback job at 2 different schools twice before. Mm-hmm. What is going to make the third time different?
I think playing in Josh Heupel's system, and if you look at his track record with quarterbacks, is just astronomically good everywhere he's been. And, he's tearing up the SEC. He tore up the SEC at Missouri as well, and with significantly not as good players. And I think this is going to be the best overall roster he has. And to your point, again, I'm not sitting here saying Joe Milton's going to be a Heisman contender or the best quarterback in the SEC. I think he's like middle of the road in the SEC, but that's probably good enough in this offense with these players to get it done. And worst case scenario, if Joe Milton's a complete bust again, which he could be, I'm not ruling that out. They've got one hell of a backup in Nico, the 5-star freshman who on threes got as the number 1 overall prospect in the country. And it sounds like if called upon, he's ready to go. And do we see a Trevor Lawrence to a Tagovailoa takeover? I mean, Nico's just as highly regarded as those guys. So I know it's crazy to sit here and say a freshman we've never seen is Trevor Lawrence Tua. I'm not quite saying that, but according to the recruiting analysts, he's of that caliber potentially. So again, if Joe Milton kind of craps himself, particularly watch that Florida game. That's the big one, because I think Florida is not going to be that good, and Tennessee should be favored. They should win that game. But if Joe Milton has a really bad game, you'll already hear people clamoring for Nico to take over, and I think it'll be somewhat warranted if Joe Milton can't beat Florida.
All right, and I've got a joke from when Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss went back up and they played Tennessee from that game. And Joe Milton was the quarterback, but this isn't necessarily a Joe Milton joke. My joke that I coined was Joe Milton was the only person in Neyland Stadium that night that didn't want to throw something.
Yeah, that's pretty good. And again, it's easy to joke about. I heard so many Tennessee people, they're ready to run him off. They never wanted to see Joe Milton on the field again. Mm-hmm. And I think that was fair, because how can you run out of bounds with the game on the line? But and maybe I'm just a sucker for good stories and things of that nature, but we live in an era where you hit adversity and you just transfer and you're never heard from again. I mean, JT Daniels, I don't know if you know this, he's playing Texas week 1. I mean, my God, he's been at like 7 colleges now. Joe Milton could have been the next JT Daniels and just transfer. He's stuck it out. He's biding his time. He's gotten better. Go back and watch that Clemson game. I mean, he played well. He was wheeling and dealing. I mean, 10 touchdowns, 0 interceptions last season, including some big-time throws in that Clemson game that were basically NFL-type throws. He's got all the arm talent in the world, and he stuck it out. So I'm eager to see what he can do. But again, like I'm telling you, there's nothing wrong with what you're saying. It's true. But he's shown flashes. But is that enough to have me pick Tennessee to do something special with Joe Milton? No, it's not.
Yeah, and other quarterbacks in the league, Jaden Daniels, Spencer Rattler, they've all flashed. I just need to see it.
Right. Well, Jaden Daniels I was really impressed with last year, I'll tell you that. I mean, I didn't think he was that good, but he had, particularly with his arm, he showcased a lot more than I thought he could. And, such a dangerous weapon with his legs, but he's not even the main reason I'm hyped up on LSU. It's, Harold Perkins and the defense getting better. Year 2, Brian Kelly, the special teams was just a disaster. If they can clean that up, that right there will make them significantly better. I thought they have an outstanding receiving core, but really it's the offensive line. And they were a train wreck when he got there. They had to start 2 true freshmen at offensive tackles. I've been covering the SEC for quite a while. I can't remember a team that started 2 true freshman offensive tackles. And it was rough at the beginning of the year, but by the end it was a strength of that team. And it's kind of the foundation of what this LSU team is. And that was the case for Brian Kelly at Notre Dame. And it seems like that's been transitioned to Baton Rouge.
Thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Also, don't forget to check out Sirius XM Channel 81 for the Ole Miss hometown broadcast at 2 Eastern, 1 Central on Saturday. Or you can search the SXM app, Ole Miss Rebels. Michael, thank you so much for joining the show today, and I hope we can do this again, bud.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All right. Take care.